So good evening, everyone. Great to see you all. Great to see so many of you. Of course, those in New South Wales and Victoria are a somewhat captive audience because we're in lockdown and maybe in other places. But still, good to see you. So I'm especially happy tonight that we have a new speaker with us who we haven't seen yet on UPM. So we're very happy that Father Rene Ramirez is going to talk to us tonight. So tonight we continue with the second lesson on dialogue. So this one focuses on Asia, Asian cultures, but Rene will tell you all about that. Since many of you might not have met him, I myself have met him today, just a couple of words of who he is. He's a Filipino priest, and he belongs to an order I have just discovered the other day talking to him, the Rogationist order. The name comes from the Latin word rogate, which means pray for the laborers for the harvest. So that's the word of life of that order. That was founded in the late 1800s. So Father Rene was ordained in 98, and that's when he met the Focolare movement as well, if I'm right, or before that, or you can correct me. He has a master in education management and then did a licentiate in Rome and a diploma in social communications. So it's really great to have you here with us. And I think you're in Australia since 2015 and currently parish priest in Maidstone and Braybrook. So some of the people here, I see Eliana waving and cheering. Some of our people here know you from there. So it's great to have you, and we look forward to what you're going to tell us.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. The sharing this evening actually was a paper I received from Bruno. Bruno called me and said, could you please help us with the UPM? And I answered yes before even realizing what I have to do. Anyway, so Cress wrote this, the basis of this presentation is Cress's paper, which she presented last November 7 at the Centro dell'Opera via Zoom, I guess. And the title is Come viene recepita e interpretata la categoria del dialogo della cultura asiatica. She was asked, according to her, by Francisco Canzani and Renata Simon of the Indigo part of the movement, those in charge of the Indigo, which is ongoing formation, to share about the culture, what it means to, what does dialogue look like for Asians. So they ask questions based on what they know about Asians, mostly preconceived ideas, which Cress tried to explain and present something for, well, it's not actually encompassing, but according to her, it's just a tool for a conversation starter. And that's what we're hoping to achieve this evening. Just some tools in order to start a conversation about dialogue with Asians. So when Jana sent the link to you, she gave you this outline, and technicality is controlling my slides, and so you're familiar with it, so I'll just go. That will be the coverage of the sharing this evening. So we go to Asia. I have to admit that my concept of Asia when I usually hear Asia maybe was very much limited to Southeast Asia, because that was the world where I grew in, not realizing how big Asia is. So it's actually divided into 6 regions. So North, Central, West, East, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. So the regions are represented in this map, as you can see. It's maybe 1/3 of the globe. So I'll just go through them quickly. So Russia is North Asia, only Russia. That in itself is just North Asia. It's very interesting. And then Central Asia would be yes, Central Asia will be the smallest sub-region in Asia. It was considered to be a distinct region since 1843. So we have the stans: Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. So they were all previously part of the Soviet Republic. Then West Asia, which is more familiar with us as the Middle East. So there are 17 countries in West Asia: Armenia, Azerbaijan, Bahrain, Cyprus, Georgia, Iraq, Israel, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Turkey, United Arab Emirates, and Yemen. And I have to click. I always, yes. And then South Asia, which would be India, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Maldives, Nepal, Sri Lanka. So 8 countries in South Asia. And then East Asia, China, Mongolia, Taiwan, North Korea, South Korea, Japan. And then our very own Southeast Asia with 11 countries, which many of us are familiar with, I'm sure. It includes Brunei, Cambodia, Timor, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam. So Asia comprises almost 60% of the world population. Very interesting. And 1% of that are Christians, and 75% of the 1% are Christians found in the Philippines, East Timor, Cyprus, Russia, Armenia, and Georgia. So 60% of the world population, almost 60% of the world population. I actually computed that 75%, 96%, no, sorry, 96 million would be from the Philippines of 400 million. So almost 1/4. So this evening's presentation would actually revolve around how is the category of dialogue understood and interpreted in the Asian culture. And when Cress did her paper, I actually received it in Italian. She actually presented her source, which would mainly be the Federation of Asian Bishops' Conferences. So just a short background, it was the Federation of, you know that each country would have a bishops' conference. And for Asia, a federation was made in the 70s. It was during the occasion of the visit of Paul VI to the Oriental and Southeast Asia. And Cress made mention that she was basing many of her materials in this presentation from the FABC papers, since, with that variety that we see for Asia, I think really an authority could be the FABC, especially when it comes to a Christian Catholic point of view regarding the things that we would like to know. Cress actually worked with the FABC, and up until now, she's working with them partly, especially now that the Philippines is celebrating 500 years of the arrival of Christianity in the highlands. So what is the perspective of the Asian Church on dialogue? That's actually what we would like to explore this evening. The term dialogue is the key to understand the Asian continent, according to FABC. In their assembly in 74, the bishops sought to discover how the church, a tiny flock, compared to those 56% of the world population, then 1% of that are just Christians. And how could we view dialogue when we are the very, very minute minority? And so they identified three significant and all-pervasive Asian social phenomena. So the bishops identified the great poverty of the Asian people, the rich mosaic of their ancient cultures, and their religious and philosophical traditions. It's interesting because there's a paper written by the FABC on the 50th anniversary on the issuance of Nostra Aetate, which is the document on the relation of the church to non-Christian religions, written by Pope Paul VI in 1965. On the 50th anniversary, the FABC asserted that dialogue was already an experiential reality in Asia. The initiatives to explore the reaches of the religious traditions and experience of the Christian mystery in dialogue with the experience and spirituality of Hinduism took form too in the various ashrams that happened mainly in India, for example. This brings to mind the millennial Asian practice of the living together of peoples of different religious traditions in harmony and mutual respect. Sometimes this harmony is disrupted not because of the people at the grassroots, but because of their leaders. So in the 90s, as a congregation, we actually started our activities in India. And since India was just starting the time, they would come to the Philippines for their novitiate and further studies. So we were exposed from an old Filipino group of religious in the Philippines. Then we started having a very large group of our Indian conferers. And because of the lack of info of the first missionaries to India, one of the first missionaries who started our work there was actually an old Italian priest. And so he was just, keen on recruiting people for the seminary. And he did not actually understand that time that there are different, maybe he knew that there were different rites, but that there are a little there's a little complication when it comes to the rites. Like we've later discovered, after accepting already seminarians, that the Roman rite, they're all Catholics, and the Syro-Malabaric rite, where most of our converts belong to, could not easily mix in India, in Kerala. And so I remember the Indian converts telling us that, we say, so what happens? What if people goes to the Syro-Malabar rite? I said, there's no problem. Most of the time, the problem is not found on the grassroots level, on the people. Most of the time, it's found on their leaders, on the priest, for example. They're very jealous in telling the people that if you are on this rite, you have to remain here, something like that. And but then as the Asian bishops, the Federation of Asian Bishops Conference has already asserted that the dialogue has been being lived by the people already, even before documents and initiatives were done, because they were coexisting side by side, and of course, people try to coexist harmoniously, peacefully. And with this, there was already dialogue happening even before the issuance of Nostra Aetate. And so because of those three phenomena, the Asian bishops, the Federation of the FABC, Federation of Asian Bishops Conferences, proposed a triple dialogue. So this triple dialogue consists of the dialogue with the poor of Asia for an integral liberation and option for the poor, dialogue with their cultures, enculturation, and then dialogue with their religious and philosophical traditions, interreligious dialogue. So FABC proposed these three hinges on which we ought to approach dialogue in Asia. That was in 1987 when this was proposed. And then 15 years after, they appended another dialogue with atheism. So it now became a quadruple dialogue. So that's just an overview of how the FABC approached the topic of dialogue, knowing and conscious about the importance of dialoguing with, when we approach dialogue in Asia, we have to be mindful of their life status, especially those of the poor, and then the rich cultural background of the Asians. As the point actually of showing you the map is just to make you realize, as I actually started also to, it started to sink in when I was trying to study the paper that Chris wrote for this evening, that we are really a plethora of cultures in Asia. So, and then dialogue with the religious and philosophical traditions. India, for example, is an entity already in itself. I remember when studying philosophy, how Indian philosophy is a course in itself. And then, of course, we have the Chinese philosophy, which is also another system of thought and thinking and reasoning. And then more recently, as I said, they included dialogue with atheism, just because, as we already saw, the Christians are just 1% of the total Asian population. And though some are, well, we know in recent studies, they were saying that majority of the people are identifying with the nones, N-O-N-E. It means people with no religion, or at least they profess, or they declare that they have no religion, and well, which could be tantamount to telling that they do not believe in a deity, or so they're atheists. Okay, so what follows? We again, we're following the skeleton that Crest provided. What follows would be some particular ideas for, or tools or basis for a fruitful dialogue in Asia. And now we'll proceed with, in the skeleton, in the presentation of Crest, she outlined some key ideas for a fruitful dialogue in Asia. And so first is inductive thinking. So the Asian approach is inductive. Thus, we arrive at the truth through lived experience. Experts on Eastern religions believe that this is the cause of the rapid spread of Buddhism in Asia. We do not start from concepts, but we start from experience. So I'm saying we because, well, obviously I'm Asian. So the Federation of Asian Bishops' Conferences uses the spiral methodology of pastoral discernment, which is called the spiral or the pastoral cycle. It is an elaboration of the, you may have heard this, of the see, judge, act methodology. Observe, judge, and then act. It is a method of liberative integration, interrelationship, and wholeness that emphasizes symbolic approaches and expressions, and is characterized by a preference for those on the periphery and outside the door. At a certain point, the FABC placed contemplation at the heart of the pastoral cycle, because despite the incursions of the postmodern world, peoples of Asia have retained a strong mystical dimension, a lively sense of the absolute God, a lived experience of transcendence, and consequently a constant recourse to prayer. I think I could speak about it, observing, for example, the composition of our parish here in Maidstone and Braybrook. And the 60% of our parishioners are Vietnamese. And if you look at the attendance, not just the attendance, but also the dedication of the people when it comes to prayer, for example, or it comes to volunteering for the church, or what I am actually very surprised with is, and I'm very glad, actually gladly surprised, is that many of the parishioners that I encounter has a certain depth to their catechism. I mean, they're well informed, they know what to do, they know how to behave in the church, or how to approach the sacraments. They're very, very aware. And I'm not just talking about the Vietnamese. I would refer to our Indian and Sri Lankan parishioners, for example, and Pakistani parishioners. And there is in our breakout rooms, one of the observations that they have I was with Richard and Vinaya, was the centrality of the family, for example, or the respect for parents. But with that actually comes also the respect and the reverence. I think reverence is a better word, the reverence that we give to God. And it's as Christians, that is our, but again, as Buddhists, for example, I have a chance to visit the Buddhist temple in Braybrook, and I have seen also that sense of transcendence, that sense of reverence that they have when when they go to the temple. And so inductive thinking for Asians is actually, we start from experience, and experience is the first thing that is most important rather than concepts. That's actually another interesting thing to discuss. What are the examples that we could give regarding inductive thinking? However, just to launch this discussion also about the different ideas for fruitful dialogue in Asia, there is actually some generalization that we could. Have you noticed, for example, that it's not just in our thinking, but it's also in our cultural ways? This became obvious when I had a chance to study in Italy, in Rome. For example, I thought it was the standard that when we count, at least that's what we're doing from where I came from, we start with our little finger. So we say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then when some of the Italian fathers came to the seminary as our formators, they were counting from their thumb as 1. I thought it was just them. But when I reached Italy, everybody was just counting from their thumb. 1, 2, 3. I'm actually having difficulty even to use my 4th finger as 4, and then 5. So we start from the, well, if you look at our hand, it's actually from the little finger to the thumb, while the Westerners would start from their thumb to the little finger. Another thing, for example, that, so it's not just with thinking. Of course, with thinking, when we say thinking, it affects everything that we do, because thinking would be dependent on how we look at things. Another example that we could discover, for example, is when you peel a fruit. My mother has taught me, when peeling the fruit, for example, to peel from my side outwards, so that the blade of the knife is not pointing at me, but it's outward. So we peel the fruit outwards. But then, for example, I'm generalizing. Some of you could correct me if this is wrong. But for Europeans, for example, it's inwards, because they said that there's more control when they peel an apple. While us, it's going outwards. For the Europeans, it's going inward. And those are some typical things that really there is an Eastern thing compared to the Western practice, and not because of, but it all comes from the way of thinking, the perspective. As I said, when peeling the fruit, it's just, it's not wrong, but it's the perspective. I'm peeling the fruit because I want the blade to go outwards to protect myself. Inwards, I might hurt myself. That's the Asian thinking. But of course, there's also a reason why people would used to peel the fruit going towards themselves, inwards. So inductive thinking. So you'll see here that deductive thinking would start from a theory, then they form the hypothesis, they observe that in order to prove the hypothesis, and then confirm the theory. Inductive thinking would be the total flip observation, then you look at patterns that you observe, and then you see tentative hypothesis, and then you form a conclusion. So that's just a graphical representation of the deductive and inductive thinking. So for Asians, it is more on inductive thinking. Experience is a very important starting point. The next thing is narrative language. What does this mean? Cardinal Tagle I wanted to say Cardinal Chito Tagle, Cardinal Antonio Luis Tagle, Luis Antonio Tagle, gave the keynote address on mission in Asia in 2006. And in that keynote address, he mentioned telling the story of Jesus, reiterating the need for the narrative language. Because one idea for a fruitful dialogue in Asia is to recognize that the Asians would be more into the narrative language. Nowadays, one of the names of narrative is narrative sharing. In Ecclesia in Asia, Pope John Paul II describes mission as sharing the light of faith in Jesus, a gift received and a gift to be shared with the peoples of Asia. This sharing can take the form of telling the story of Jesus, the telling of a story. I believe provides a creative framework for understanding the mission in Asia, a continent whose cultures and religions are rooted in the great stories and epics. St. John Paul II also recognized the narrative methods akin to Asian culture forms as a privileged way of proclaiming Jesus in Asia. Hence, the strong call to tell the story of Jesus, especially with one's own life, and to strengthen the occasions when the stories of Jesus can be shared in an informal setting. For those in Melbourne, you might have heard, you might have read the letter of the Archbishop presented during the Feast of Pentecost, when he said that we as an archdiocese is going into a missional reform and thinking how we as a diocese could approach our parishes to be missional. And part of this being missional is actually a stress to evangelization. What is evangelization? It's a very big word that we have been hearing. But what is really evangelization? Evangelization is defined as sharing the good news of Jesus, the good news that we are so much loved by God that he sent his only son. But then, how could we be evangelizers? People could say, I am not prepared. I haven't studied theology. I don't have a degree, etc. But what John Paul was saying in Ecclesia in Asia is actually that we go back to our stories, that we use our stories in order to evangelize, in order to go into dialogue. What does that mean? It means that I have to be aware of my personal story. Or better yet, we could call it, I have to be aware of my personal encounter story with Jesus. And that is what is all needed from us. Our personal encounter story. I think 2-3 Sundays ago in a homily, I shared that the blind man, when the Pharisees questioned him, said, why are you walking around during the Sabbath? And the blind man said, well, the man who healed me said I could go because I was blind and now I see. So how could you refute that? It was his personal experience, and it was his personal experience of Jesus, of God, coming to his aid and healing him from his infirmity. And what could be a better marketing strategy for the Lord if not, I was blind, but now I see? And how powerful is that? it didn't start from concepts. It didn't start from the catechism. It's not the official pronouncement of the church on the teachings of who Jesus is, but his personal encounter with the Lord. So I think we have to recuperate. This is not just, I mean, Jesus was Asian, but what I'm trying to say is this is a tool. This is something that maybe, I don't know, a treasure that we already have in Asia that we could actually emphasize and use in order to evangelize, to share the Jesus story. Not with the formulas that we receive from the church, for example, but starting as Cardinal Tagle was emphasizing here, starting from our own narrative. Okay, going forward. So another thing that we must understand when it comes to the Asian idea is that the concept of time is cyclical. This would let you know why most of the Asian countries are into the lunar calendar, because time is something that repeats itself. The references, for example, is more than a 365-year calendar is the phases, for example, of the moon. I remember when I was younger, even the farmers would have a special time to sow seeds or plant depending on the phase of the moon, for example. And that was in spite of science, etc. But they would still time their planting according to the phase of the moon. The cyclical concept of time is reflected in the way of narrating events experienced. Cress shared that in the beginning she didn't understand this. Sometimes when we do presentations, for example, or when we are in class, we're saying, okay, so what's the topic of your talk, or what's the subject of your talk? But haven't you noticed, if you were talking with an Asian, that somebody does not declare, now this will be the topic on which we actually go in circles, because we wanted to establish rapport. We wanted to establish connection first before we go to the story. Because for us, what is important is the relationship, and what we could establish as a connection, because that is actually the point why we want to share the story. Connections. So I said earlier that the concept, our perspective, influences the things that we do, and this concept of time as cyclical influences that too. Cress also in the paper mentioned that before punctuality that is based on the clock, what matters most is the friendship among us. But sometimes that could also break the friendship if you're too late. But then what we wanted to point out here is that there's a different perspective to, while of course it's out of respect that you have to come on time, that out of respect for the person that could be waiting for you, and that person has also other things to do, etc. That's one perspective. But another perspective is, it's okay, we're friends, we're connected, he understands, etc. So there are pros and cons to all this. But then it is important to understand at least where we are coming from. Okay, the next thing is that dialogue occurs primarily between people in their entirety. It's actually related. So it's not just dialogue. A study made by Kathleen Cocoon, the speeches of Pope John Paul II in India in '86, states that the common starting point, besides being the goal of dialogue between religions, is the entire human person who is fully developed in his or her spiritual and social dimensions. In 1995, Sixth General Assembly of the FABC held in Manila identified the creation of basic human communities as pastoral necessity because the mission of the church in Asia can only be realized from the basis of the foundation of human life. Okay, so see, I just wanted to emphasize, have you heard of belong, believe, behave? So I think since we were educated in the Western style, it seems that we have to, in order to belong, we have to believe first as a collective group of people so that we could behave well. So that would define our belonging. But in Asia, we would like to establish a sense of belonging first. We welcome you, we're hospitable, we want you to feel that you belong, so that later you could partake in our belief, and hopefully you may adjust the way you behave according to that belief. Now, this is also impacting the way we do evangelization, because Jesus did not expect the disciples to believe first before they called them. In fact, he called everyone. He was calling everyone here and there because everybody belongs. The 99 is left in order to search for that one sheep which is lost, because that sheep belongs to the flock too. And I think as we do church, this is a paradigm shift that we have to reach out to everyone, because everybody belongs. We could not wait for them to believe and join us in church and then behave as we are behaving so that we could consider them part of our community. So that's just something about dialogue occurring primarily between peoples in its entirety. Human values are transcultural. The author, Kress, was just saying that they exist in all cultures. So sometimes we could not just zero in on biases, or we could not just dwell in biases. For example, that the Asians are shy, that the Asians are silent, that they readily cry. We have a crying cardinal in Rome because to express their deepest emotions. One could see what extent these human values involve. Maybe, of course, there's a truth to it as a collective people also, but then we have to consider that it's not just sometimes Asian. We just have to. And then the concept of harmony. The concept of harmony, according to FABC theologians, is meant to express the totality of the Asian reality in its infinite diversity and fundamental unity. So it is no surprise in Asia that we rarely hear the word unity, especially in the movement, according to Kress and her experiences at Focolarina. If you're dialoguing with the Asians, well, of course, except for those who are really into the movement. But then we try to stress more harmony. Harmony is very important. In fact, we try to avoid conflict. Maybe I could say this. In my experience, the Asians would try to avoid conflict, not because they can't handle conflict, because they don't want to say sorry, because sorry is a very important word. So in order to avoid saying sorry, they try as much as possible to live in harmony, or to adjust, or sometimes give up some things just to live in harmony. But maybe on the flip side, for some of our Westerner friends, they could just, they could offend you and just say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize." But maybe, and that's enough because they have apologized, because they have said sorry. But maybe for the Asians, it's not as easy as saying sorry or saying I apologize, but it's more on your, on the way you look, on the way you approach the person, on your atteggiamento, on your ways of doing things, that you have to express that you're sorry. Since maybe because we for us, sorry does not come easy because we're avoiding, we're more on harmony. So we rarely want to say sorry because we are rarely trying to. But then sometimes I think that's one of the the contrast. While sometimes, especially when I was in Rome, my cultural shock experiences would say, "Mi dispiace, I'm sorry." But I said, is that all? I mean, I don't even see a remorse on your face, but since you said sorry, everything should be okay. So, but then of course we get used to the situation, and we also try to understand how things are done on that side of the world, and of course we accommodate. And this came out in our sharing extended family. So extended family, very big in Asia. I thought it was a Filipino thing, but I saw with the Vietnamese parishioners that they're big on this too, helping family also back in Vietnam, trying to sponsor family so they could come to Australia, etc. The family includes all relatives, friends, even friends, or people you get close to growing up. So sometimes they wouldn't understand why there's this joke that when you marry a Filipina, you don't just marry her, you marry her whole family. Just because it's very ingrained in the Asian DNA, I guess. I also see that for our Indian parishioners, we're big on family. And it's very important, that connection. In fact, a joke is while most of the children of families would leave the nest after they turn 18 or 19, sometimes some of us are living with our some Asians are still living with their parents even at a very advanced adult age. And touch culture. In the example of Cress in the paper, she was referring to how we have to touch, for example, the statues in order to really express our connection to God, the importance of touch. I did a little more digging, and it's actually something very true. While in every Asian culture, it's rude for members of the opposite sex to kiss, hug, or hold hands in public. These are considered to be intimate acts that are only done in private. But on the flip side, hand holding between people of the same gender is totally okay. That has been my experience. I remember when I was in high school, we have to walk home, and me and my other friends, all male, would sometimes, just walk holding hands, and it was okay. It would be a scene if it would be boy and girl, of course. And then I remember when the Indians were coming to the seminary from India, and we were already all seminarians, of course, affected by our Italian formators. And initially, some of them would do their rosaries holding hands, and it was a bit of a scandal for us. But then it was normal, for example, in India. And this is also extended, for example, to Arabs. If they meet friends, the Arab men would bump their cheeks on the same side, twice for strangers and thrice for friends, for example, but not man to a woman, but only man to man. So the Russians, I guess, Let me see my notes. Yeah, male friends may hug one another or give each other a pat on the back for Russian men. Women kiss people 3 times on alternating cheeks, beginning from the left cheek. So there is that thing also in Asia. While in other cultures, I remember a friend from Finland. The mother was my friend, and her daughter married a Finnish guy, and she was mad at this guy when she went to Finland. And she was saying, "Why are you telling me good morning and you're not looking at me?" Because, and then it was explained to her that it's like invasive for somebody to look directly at you. It's a kind of respect not for them not to look at you. And that was an experience that mother, for example, shared with me in her experience when she visited her daughter who married a Finnish guy. Last, spirituality. Oh, sorry. Spirituality is the backbone of Asia. This is actually from Chiara. So in 1997, I think that was the year when Chiara received the honorary doctorate at the University of Santo Tomas. I was actually there. Somebody from Brazil asked Chiara, when you were in Brazil, no, sorry. Somebody asked Chiara, when you were in Brazil, the red bomb exploded with the economy of communion. In Africa, the orange bomb exploded with inculturation. In Asia, what do you think would be the bomb? And Chiara responded, it's not 1, but 2, according to her. So there are 2 that came out, Chiara said. The first one is a dialogue with other religions that was opened for the first time in a grand manner. However, the bomb of dialogue has exploded. It seems to me that dialogue is really the yellow, because it is to love. It is to make oneself one. It is to bring religion ahead. It is to harness all the other religions, the beauty that is in the others. And that happened here in Asia. And I think through that, we could also say that in Asia, knowledge is achieved through the spirituality of the people. So, yeah, so when Chiara spoke of the yellow, it was dialogue, of course, in line with spirituality. So, conclusion, I will just read Cress's conclusion. Rudyard Kipling once wrote, "East is east and west is west, and never shall the 2 meet. Yet we are living proof, we here and in the movement, that this is possible, to the extent that we leave what Chiara wrote on the 24th of September 1949. The person next to me was created as a gift for me, and I was created as a gift for the person next to me. Let us hope that Asia, this minority of that is the majority, may be given, the majority around the world, may be given an ever more space and voice also within the movement." And I would like to add this. My takeaway from this exercise this evening is that there is always another perspective to the same reality. To be aware of the other is always an advantage towards building bridges that could lead us all to unity. I hope that has offered some conversation starters amongst ourselves, and hopefully some tools in order to understand our Asian brothers and sisters better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father Rene. So I'm aware that we are going slightly over time. Apologies to the New Zealanders for whom it's getting late-ish. So if you are starving because you didn't have dinner, or if you have other things to go to, feel free to do that. If you would like to stay a little bit longer and ask some questions or make some comments, you're very welcome to do that. Maybe the manner in that of that might be to put your name in the chat or to raise the hand in the reactions function.
I have a question, Rene. When you talk about avoiding conflict and avoiding saying sorry, is that related to what we in the West maybe see as this idea that Asian people don't want to lose face?
Yes, yes. Actually, in another website on harmony, that is actually another aspect that was discussed, which I actually didn't go into. I just stuck with the paper of press. But I found it too in my research. And saving face is something, it's a big deal, for example, in Asia. I think that is also related to, I was with Richard in the breakout rooms on the respect for the elders. Like in Asia, that's also a big thing, that if you're even a week older than your brother, then respect is due to that older brother. In fact, in Chinese, there is a term for a sister and a brother according to their position in family. I'm sure some of you knows that, because respect is a big thing. And sometimes out of respect to that person and out of harmony, at least in my experience, you know, sometimes truth might be in danger because some would just accommodate in order for that person not to lose face. But again, I think that's, that maybe that's typical. But then in Italy, for example, I've seen some folks saying, you know, they say, oh, don't let me lose face right now, so please help me, or do something like that. So I think it's transcultural, but then maybe it's stronger in Asia.
Father,
oh, sorry, Chris had her hand up. Maybe
I have not understood. I have not understood. I have not understood properly. Point number 3, concept of time is cyclical. I have not understood that at all.
Oh, okay. According to the paper, for Asians, the time is cyclical. It's not linear, and like I think this also is affected when we tell stories. It becomes a spiral. No, a spiral when some would accuse us of going around the bush, but it's actually trying to create connection and rapport while you do the spiral. No, it's and develop what you're saying. It's because that's how I understood it when we say time is cyclical. In fact, for the Indian Buddhists, for the Buddhists, not just the Indians, time is cyclical because of reincarnation. And Vinya in our breakout room was just saying that even the Buddhists would not, what is good is that they would not harm even ants, because they would be afraid that they might be reborn in a lower form of animal. So, and I think that though the Philippines is majority Christians, but then most of the Asians, given that map and also the composition of who we are in Asia, 1% is only Christian. Then we grew up being influenced by all this thinking around us in Asia.
You see,
if somebody wants to add.
Well,
I have a question, Father.
Who's that? Yes, Mima Haynes.
Marilu.
Marilu.
Yes. I don't know if you have read the book of Father de la Rosa about who are we Filipinos.
No. Maybe you could share.
Sorry?
Maybe you could share what you read.
Yes, this is the reason why I asked you, because there he really explained who are we Filipinos, and we have to look back the history of the Filipinos. But So that is what I'm
Sorry.
saying is he emphasized our national hero, Jose Rizal.
Yes.
And because Jose Rizal being a writer, and I think he was privileged to go overseas, he saw the goodness in the Filipinos despite what we experienced under the Spaniards. And what he really wanted for Filipinos is to speak up, to speak up. And then I think until now, this is what Father De La Rosa is emphasizing, is to remove the colonial mentality. We have our own personality as Filipinos. And when we always say that, oh, Filipinos are shy, oh, Filipinos are soft-spoken, perhaps because of that mentality, that colonial mentality, and what Jose Rizal, that national hero, left as a legacy is forget your culture, and also adding spirituality there. And what I've learned from Kiara, if we are dialoguing with other nationality or religion, you have to forget or set aside your culture to be one with people, because you in dialoguing, I think we have to make other people, as you said, to belong, to make other people comfortable in approaching us, to belong. And that's, I think, the time when those who are soft-spoken, and once they see that they belong, they will open up. And this is the spirituality that I've learned from Kiara. To be in unity is to set aside your culture. And that is loving first. And I think I put that together with what this national hero left as a legacy. Forget your colonial mentality. We Filipinos have something to give. And I think it's not only the Filipinos, other Asian also, that you have your own. Stick to what you have, to what is good in Filipinos or Vietnamese or Indian. What is good, you retain. What is bad, you discard. And I think really, for me, that national hero is my hero, because I added the spirituality of what Jose Rizal was saying. Forget that colonial mentality. I hope you can read that book, Father.
Yeah, I hope to.
Because
Just a quick comment. Just a quick comment. I think when I was when I think when I was in the Philippines, when I haven't migrated yet, that was also my perspective. I'm tagging it as colonial mentality. However, and this is just again a conversation starters among the people who are here. I could be wrong. However, I also discovered that I don't call it colonial mentality anymore, because what I thought as being inferior to the Spaniards, for example, that feeling which we tagged as colonial mentality. I think colonial mentality is preferring the Spaniard way. I think that's how colonial mentality is. Inferiority is saying that I am inferior, I could not talk because they're superior or they know better. But then this attitude of being shy or silent, etc., I actually discovered when I was exposed more here in the parish, being very multicultural, that it's not something that I could only attribute to myself being Filipino, because the Vietnamese are very much like us. The people from Indonesia are very much like us, at least in my dealings with them here. So I was saying that I could say that I think it's an Asian thing, because we would like to, as we said, first observe, because it's inductive. We would like to observe and see how people will react, or how we want to deal with people. That's why we do not, we're not, I mean, some people could be extrovert, but maybe even though we're extrovert, I know a Vietnamese guy, who's very extrovert among peers, but once I put him in a meeting in the parish council, he doesn't speak, he just observes. And then he will give his recommendations, and brilliant ones, during the one-on-one, because he already knows me. So now, after 6 years of experience in the community, I am rediscovering that it's not just a Filipino thing, but it's something that we share in Asia. And I think in order to dialogue with cultures, we have to be comfortable in that, in our own skin, in who we are, and know. I think that's the purpose of this forum. In order for us to really assess, yes, who are we as Asians and what are the common denominators, in order to say that, look, this is not coming for inferiority. This is just a perspective in life. And when we say perspective, it's actually the perspective of the same reality. So half glass, half empty is the same thing, but it's just how we look at it. It's not saying that we're wrong saying it's half empty, or the other side saying it's half full. It's the same reality, but hoping to know that I'm saying it's half empty, you're saying it's half full, that when we merge when we dialogue, we'll say that it's the same thing. We're just looking at it from different perspectives. And I think that would be a tool in order to enhance building bridges.
Thank you.
Thank you too, Mila.
Yes, I think there's a very good words to finish on, almost, tool for building bridges. That's what this dialogue is all about, isn't it? And then it can be an enrichment for both, for both sides, whether the glass is half full or half empty. The differences can become enrichments. So I thank you very much, Rene, for this presentation. It was really...
Thank you for the opportunity. It's nice to see old faces 25 years ago.
You have to come more often.
I've seen Tunet 25 years ago. Yes, good.
Yes, so
thank you everyone for your patience.
Thank you, Father. Hope to meet you in person.
Sure, I'm just here. The lockdown is over.
Much.
And then just lastly, the next one is, next UPM is on the 18th of August. And it will be on Churches in Dialogue, Education for Peace, and it will be SEMA presented. So we'll very much look forward to that one as well. Let's stop that. So yes, SEMA, we look forward to hearing from you next time.
Thank you. Thanks very